when the Jews were being rounded up and sent to concentration camps, to death camps, they heard that they could get a visa to pass, to go through his country on the way somewhere else. And he began issuing visas. The normal day he could issue maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 visas. But he had tremendous pity on the Jewish people who were lining up, hoping to be able to escape what was awaiting them. And he began issuing hundreds of visas, even thousands of visas. His hands just wouldn't even work. He was working day and night until his country heard about it, and they recalled him. He had to return. He was demoted from his rank, from his position, and given some obscure clerical position in a different place. When he was leaving on the train, he took his stamp, he threw it out the window to somebody else so they should issue more visas. He saved thousands of Jewish lives. So I was doing research for this story, for an artist, so that he would depict, the idea of the story was that this ambassador met a Jewish lady in a grocery store, and they spoke and they became friendly, and she came over. It was Hanukkah time. So it was a Hanukkah story. And this awakened his interest in the Jewish people, and when supposedly descendant of this Jewish family attributed the merit to his ancestor. So that was the story. So I was doing research on what the place, getting pictures of what the place looked like. So the artist would do an accurate illustration. And I came across a very horrifying incident in Lithuania, that the non-Jews in Lithuania were worse than the Germans. They took great delight in killing Jews, and the Germans even said they're worse than we are. They're more vicious and cruel than we are. And one of the incidents showed a man who for some reason went a little crazy, and he took a huge, long metal bar, like a construction bar. It was strong, and they grabbed a Jewish person and threw him into the center of a circle, and this person hit him, swung this bar around and hit him, and knocked him dead and killed him. And then they grabbed another Jew and threw him in, and so it went on. And he killed, I don't know how many, 20, 25 different people. And as he killed each person, the crowd around of women and men cheered. They were cheering. It was really horrifying. Yesterday, when they brought out the little boxes with 2 days ago, with the children that had been the young children who had been killed by the terrorists in Gaza, there were hundreds, maybe more, thousands, cheering. It was reminiscent of what took place in Lithuania before the Holocaust. And all the sympathizers of Gaza. That's it. The whole world is cheering on. Let us say a kapitel Tehillim at least. Chapter 20. Nam natzeh mizmor ledove. Yam hanay b'yimtzah zedom Hashem Elohim yanki. Ish achazah habetedesh. U'mitzeh sadeka. Iskar kol michosech v'elos anasha salam. Iten achah halatzas v'yimah. Ran shu asecha. Hashem Elohim nidiyah yimah. Adonai kol mishalei secha. Ata yodaiti ki Heshia Adonai Meshirei Now I know, says David HaMelech, the king, that Hashem will save his anointed one. Yaneu Mishmei Kodshe, and answer him from the highest heavens, the Geburis with might, salvation, Yemina from his right hand, Elim Rechav, Elim Basusim, some come with chariots and some come with their cavalry. V'anachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu nazkir, hem hakaru v'nafalu, v'anachnu kamnu v'nis eidad, Adonai Hashem Melech Aleinu v'hem karenu. And so many in the world buy into the propaganda that the Jews are the ones to be blamed. The Jews themselves are the villains. Well, you know, everybody knows about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, or like they say in English, Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah. These cities, big cities, there were 5 boroughs to these cities, just like there are 5 boroughs to New York. They were very heartless. The Medrash writes about them, about their cruelty. One of the rules, one of the laws of Sodom was you're not allowed to have guests. If you take in guests, you deserve the death penalty. That is the worst thing because it's going to destroy society. You're going to have a society of moochers, of people who don't take care of themselves. They just rely on charity. So therefore, it became illegal. Lot was Sarah's brother. Lot went to live in this city because it was a city with a lot of pleasures, a lot of delights to be had in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And he liked it, and they made him a big shot. But he had learned from Abraham the virtue of taking in guests, and he did. He was secretly taking in guests, and his daughter, he was trained to do the same thing. He had a daughter who was like that. And she was caught feeding a homeless person or a hungry person, because she had learned this from her father, who learned it from Abraham. And they caught her and they smeared her naked body with honey and put her on the rooftop of a building there, and she was stung to death by bees. And when that happened, her cries went up to heaven and sealed the death sentence on Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's why those cities were overthrown. And special angels were sent in the merit of Abraham to save Lot and his family. His family laughed at him. They said he was a crazy old man. They didn't believe him. The people of the city almost lynched him because he took the angels in as guests. They didn't realize that they weren't really Arabs. There was a lynching, and the angels made everybody go blind. They couldn't find the doorway, and Lot and his daughters escaped. And because of that, we're here today, because Lot is our great-grandfather. And his daughters had intimate relations with him and gave birth to 2 illegitimate children. Me'am, they took refuge in a cave when the cities were overthrown. They took refuge in a cave and they found wine there, and Lot got drunk. And his daughters had relations with him while he was drunk, one after the other, one night after the other. And from these relations came 2 children. One, the elder daughter called him Me'av, which means from my father. This child is my father's child. Which, even though the Torah hadn't been given, but the 7 mitzvahs had been given, and having relations with a child was forbidden. And the second daughter did the same thing, but she was more modest, and her child was called Me'am. He became the father of the nation of Ammon, and Moab became a nation also, who play a crucial role in the Torah. That Balak was the king of Moab. he hired Bilam to curse the Jewish people when they came up from Egypt. Now we're going 400 years ahead into history. And he was afraid of the Jewish people are going to take over his kingdom. He hired Bilam to curse them, and all his curses came out as blessings. It's a famous story in the Torah. And Balak had a daughter, and she left Moab and became Jewish. She converted. And she had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, one of whom was Ruth, the grandfather of Mashiach. We're all here.
I thought Ruth converted.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, 100% right. Ruth converted. She went with Naomi. Your famous says, your people, whither you go, that's where I will also go. Your people will be my people. And she was the great-grandmother of David HaMelech. Extraordinary to know that this is where we come from. And the question is asked, how come Mashiach should come from such an extraordinarily negative story? And the answer is usually given is because the Yetzer Hara knew that the Neshama of Mashiach was coming into the world. He would fight against it with all his might, but he would never have dreamed that from an illegal relationship like this is going to come Mashiach. And so he let the Neshama sneak into the Neshama of Mashiach snuck in through the back door, so to speak. It's a strange answer, but that is the answer that I've been told on a couple of occasions. And the same thing applies to Yehuda, that Yehuda went to the sheep shearing and he stopped to have relations with a prostitute by the crossroads. That prostitute was actually his daughter-in-law who longed to have relations, to have a child from Yehuda. And he had cast her aside because she'd been married to Yehuda's two sons, and she was extremely beautiful and righteous. And they both died. They died. And he was afraid to give his third son, Shelah, to her. And she saw she was being ignored. So she went and had a child anyway with him. And that's the and there's the other side of the relationship. So on both sides, it's very questionable, the whole thing, but that's how the Neshama of Mashiach comes into the world. Well, why do I tell you that story? Because when the daughter of Lot was lynched, so to speak, when she was killed, her cries went up to heaven, and Hashem said, that's the last straw. That sealed the fate of the 5 boroughs of Sodom, and the city was totally overthrown. And Lot was told to flee. The angels took out Lot and his daughters, and they were told, don't look back. You don't deserve to survive. Don't watch the punishment of these wicked people. And she did look back, and so she was turned to a pillar of salt, the famous pillar of salt. Why salt? Because she was stingy about salt. She didn't like having guests, and when Lot brought in the angels and he served them food, they didn't eat it, but they pretended to eat. And she said, even salt, you give them salt, was very precious. It was like they didn't have refrigerators. They used salt as a preservative. So salt was like gold in those days. And she said, you give them salt too, she said. And since that was her attitude about salt, she loved it so much, she became salt. So we have to be careful about the things what we love. Okay, so we're talking about idle speech and people who can't learn because they never got the tools to be able to learn. So when they do tshuva, they just, idle speech, they have to go through the kafakala, kafakela, to cleanse out the neshama from all the dust, spiritual dust, which comes from idle talk, pointless talk. And their punishment is in the purgatory of snow. Aside from the purgatory of wasting time that could have been used for learning Torah. We're now at the bottom of page 132 with a very big question. We're going to have to deal with it quickly because I spent the whole class talking about Sodom, just the similarity of Sodom, how they wanted to lynch Lot and his guests, is so parallel to what we're seeing, the pictures coming out of Gaza now. And also extremely parallel, extremely similar to the reaction of the masses of people in Lithuania and throughout Europe during the Holocaust, before and during the Holocaust. They were just doing what everybody else was doing. Okay, now what about the question about going to college? If idle talk is so serious, such a serious transgression, should I go to college? Page 132. A person who occupies himself in learning about science and philosophy and the wisdom of the nations of the world. Halacha considers this idle chat, idle talk. Halachically speaking, it's just like wasting time. It comes under the category of wasting time that could have been used for learning Torah. Well, in previous generations, women didn't learn Torah anyway, very much. My grandmother, Alea Hasholem, came to Canada because she couldn't get an education in Lithuania, where she was from. So she came to Canada because they didn't teach girls. Teaching girls Torah was an innovation from about 100 years ago. People began to pay attention to the potential of women. Before that, the women kept Judaism alive through their emunah and their strong belief in whatever they knew, which was the traditions that they learned in their home. Didn't have people moving around. People continued, and even people got married and moved in to their parents' home for several years till they had their own family. Okay. So going to learning about philosophy, mathematics, science, and so on is halachically considered bittul Torah. So how am I going to get around this? The Hilchos Talmud Torah, and there are laws called the laws of Talmud Torah, and they're just the same as any other laws in the Torah. What am I supposed to do? I had students. Okay, I'm not going to tell you the stories. Maybe tomorrow I'll tell you another story. But a student who came to me with a problem. What am I supposed to do? My teacher says the world is 70 billion years old. What am I going to do? Torah says 5,700, and that time was 38 years. I remember it. The nice boy. I said, just ask your teacher what came first. Don't let him off the hook. Anyway, I'll tell you the story tomorrow. But page 133. In addition, the impurity that comes to a person from learning the sciences, learning philosophy of the nations, okay? In addition to Tumas Dvarim B'Teilim. She'enei malbish u'metame rak hamidus miyasoid haruach hakodesh shebenafshei elokis. He says, this is even more serious than just idle talk. In other words, learning science and philosophy is more serious than just idle talk, nonsense. Why? Because idle talk nonsense only affects your emotions. With what? With the impurity of the power of air, speech in the animal soul. The Tumas Klippas Noiga, third paragraph, page 133. So your emotions become sullied with the impurity from Klippas Noiga, and this impurity is the inner life in Dvarim B'Teilim. That's the energy that people have, why they like talking Dvarim B'Teilim, why they like talking nonsense. Haboim Miyasoid HaRuach, and this root is rooted in the element of Ruach, which is air, source of our breath. Ruach Hara, a bad Ruach, Shabaklipa Zu, in this klippa, which is Klippas Noiga, Shabanafsha Bahamis, which is part of the animal soul. Like we learned in chapter 1, there are 4 elements, all play and have an effect they all work through the animal soul. So the fire in the animal soul leads to arrogance and anger. And water in the animal soul leads to the desire for pleasure. And ruach, air, in the animal soul leads to what? Idle speech and slander and scoffing, making fun of virtuous behavior and virtuous people, and so on. And remember, earth in the animal soul leads to depression and laziness. Okay. So now on the bottom of page 133, so the idle speech is sullied, is made impure with the spirit of impurity in the animal soul from the ruach hara, from the power of air in the animal soul. However, this is not as bad as studying the philosophy of the nations, because it doesn't affect your brain, just affects your feelings. Ooh, that made me very upset. Yeah. Ooh, I heard this about so-and-so. I heard this gossip, this slander, and made me very upset. Oh, I really liked this class, and someone said, made fun of it. Oh, that made me feel terrible. See, it affects your emotions. Or, oh, I really want to be in that class. I hear he tells a lot of jokes. These are emotional responses. So idle talk affects your emotions, but not your brains. But when you study philosophy, you're using your head. Idle talk doesn't affect your chabad of your nefesh. Because idle talk. How did the Tottenham Hotspurs do this week? Which baseball team won? Which basketball team who got traded from one team to the other team? Idle talk, right? Doesn't affect your brains, because bottom of page 133, Shagam Hashoitim, because even foolish people who have no ideas in their head, but they can also talk about the same kind of about baseball scores and who's going to be in the Super Bowl and which inning will it be over and so on. Page 134. However, this is not the case. This is not the case with the wisdom of the nations. Now we know that the Greek people have a lot of wisdom. They understand astronomy, astrology, but astronomy they understand. I mean, their knowledge of the movements of the spheres, and that's very important to Judaism because our whole calendar is calculated in advance, hundreds of years in advance, because we go by the lunar calendar. And the relationship of the lunar calendar to the solar calendar is a very complex one. And it's all laid out in Rambam. It's extremely hard to understand. Very few people here in Crown Heights can really master it. There's about the first 6 chapters I can get through. After that, I'm lost. I'm lost. It's just too deep and too complicated. Okay, that's my warning. Where's my phone? Oh, Rebbe Simcha, you're with us the whole time. Okay, we've got a few more minutes. This is a 5-minute warning. Okay, so to learn the science of the Greeks, or to learn the wisdom of the Far East, the wisdom of of the great philosophers from the Far East and so on, what happens? The energy that you put into understanding these subjects defiles the Chabad of your godly soul with the impurity of Klippas Noiga, which comes from Klippa. And that is the inner energy of these sciences. What is such high energy doing in Klippa? And the answer is, now here's a complicated answer. For this, to understand this answer, we have to go back and just talk about the creation of the world. What happened? When Hashem comes to create the world, so all the energy is in Hashem. How is he going to now create something outside of himself? So the answer is Tzimtzum. He has to contract himself and limit himself. And when he does that, stage one is the potential to give over a minimized version of his infinite energy. Okay, and this has to happen maybe an infinite number of times till the energy is so stepped down, just like the energy from Niagara Falls has to get stepped down and stepped down and stepped down over and over and over again. You can see the resistors, they're called, energy resistors, through which the electricity travels till it gets to your home, because it's too powerful for your electrical equipment to deal with it. It has to be stepped down, contracted, limited. And at the initial stages of the stepping down, it's not enough. It's not enough. So the energy, even though it's stepped down, is still too great, and the resistors to contain it are not yet developed enough to hold it. So the energy is too great for the resistor, and what happens? The resistor explodes. And it's stepped down again, and maybe explodes again on a lower level, until they level off. And the energy is so little, and the resistor is so powerful, that we can get a stable version of energy that we can work with. That's called the breaking of the vessels, or in Hebrew it's called Shvir Sakedim, is a secret of creation. So this is what he says here on page 134 at the top, that how does it happen that we have the wisdom of God enclosed in the sciences of the non-Jewish people whose souls come from Klippas Noiga? How does this wisdom end up in Klippa? And that's why we have this very enticing philosophy of the non-Jewish people. You know, a little bit in my own background, at one point when I was 27 years old, I met people who were interested in Chinese philosophy. And I encountered a book called the I Ching. And when I found out about Shabbos, so I said to myself, is this really free? And I consulted the I Ching to find out. And you know what the I Ching said to me? It said a great virtue is to repair the fences that got broken down from their previous generation. I said, good. I gave away my book, and I started studying the Code of Jewish Law. But the question is, how did this holy wisdom end up in Klippa? And the answer is, at the shattering of the vessels. You know, there's panemius and there's chitzonius. There's inner life and there's external. So from the external side of Chachma and Atzilus, but the breaking of the vessels, so this power of Chabad from holiness ended up in Klippas Noiga. And that's the source of the wisdom of the nations. And now the Tanya is telling us It's telling us, what should I do? I mean, I'm supposed to study this. I'm in college, I'm studying. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse. I have to study these things. I have to know about sciences, connecting with health, and so on. So the answer is here on page 334, in three paragraphs here. Ella im kain eis in kardum nachtoy bahen. The answer is, if I use the knowledge that I gained from my college, my studies in college, if I use it in serving God, that justifies it in the eyes of Hashem. And I'm allowed to use it in order to earn a living. I'm allowed to use it. I mean, Dr. Block, an old friend of mine, Olav Sholem, he was a professor of Greek. He wanted to be a rabbi. The Rebbe said, no, you have to be a professor of Greek in the College of Western Ontario. He was from Nashville. and there you will meet Jewish people and bring them under the wings of the Shekhinah, which he did. He made a lot of Baalei Tshuva. The expression is you use it as a like a shovel to dig with or an axe to chop with. In order to earn a living, and then to use your money to give tzedakah and to pay for education of your children. So you have to earn a living, a good living, in order to serve God. And learning medicine, learning all these sciences can enable you to become a doctor on Fifth Avenue. There's a girl who was here several years ago from ASU, down south, University of what? I forget. Somewhere near Texas. Ariel is from that. And she was married, she was engaged to a young man named Abela, and he became a doctor, and they're both on the staff, sort of supporters of ASU, Chabad ASU today. We just got an appeal from them. So either he uses his knowledge in college to earn a living, or even better, he uses it to guide others and teach others Torah. V'zehu taimai, and that's why Rambam studied Greek, studied astronomy from the Greeks. And the Ramban also, Zichrein Livracha, the Siyatan and their students, V'asaku behen, and they put a lot of energy into learning the knowledge of the Greek people, and they used it in the service of Hashem and Torah. With that, we finish chapter 8. Wow. We did it. Now we got to move on to chapter 9. And remember, what did we say yesterday about the Beinani? What is the Beinani? The Beinani is not a tzaddik because the Beinani, the tzaddik has no inclination whatsoever. He has killed his Yetzer Hara, chapter 1, Tanya chapter 1. He killed his Yetzer Hara. He has no Yetzer Hara. He has no temptation to do bad. His whole Yetzer Torah is to remain in this world helping people, and not just to spend his whole life meditating in God. That's the tzaddik. The Beinani wants to indulge in bad behavior, and he doesn't do it. That's the difference. The Rasha wants to do bad things and gives in, sometimes just a little bit, not eensy-weensy bit, some not very often, not very serious, but every little infraction makes him a wicked person. He's not a Beinani. A Beinani never does even an eensy-weensy tiny little vera. He wants to, but he doesn't do it. And that's the difference. That's what the Beinani is all about. And the goal of learning Hasidus is that the Rasha in us should struggle to become a Beinani. And the Beinani should struggle to be even better. And who knows, possibly sometimes could succeed. Okay, now I got to run. I don't think I said a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Al kalmasha brasa la hayes by Namshko. Thank you, girls.
Thank you.
If you have friends who weren't here today, please review today's lesson. It's very important for people to know. It's a crucial lesson. When we move on in chapter 9 to a new level. Enjoy the nice weather.
Oh,